Paul George has gone through the trenches in his NBA career. From competing against prime LeBron and making the cover of 2K, the scandals with strippers, bricks off the side of the backboard, and the many podcasts.
Stay healthy.
You saying I'm loving?
That has nothing to do with the game.
Yes, it does. That's like saying
You can't say that.
Why not?
Look at our boy.
But something that has come up over the past few years, more so by the newer generation of players and fans, is the ranking of Paul George all time. Somehow Paul George has found a way to fit his name in with the likes of LeBron, MJ, and Shvi Mikhailuk in that GOAT conversation.
So Paul George, best player in the NBA. Yeah, best player ever.
Stop lying. Stop lying.
We all know that's a reach, but it made me realize a lot of newer fans perceive Paul George as this do-it-all superstar because of his skill set and don't really know about the rest of his wild career. And when looking back at his career, I've come to the conclusion that Paul George is a certified Temu superstar. Let me explain. So Paul had a hot start to his basketball career, starting in high school, getting his ass whooped daily by his sister in the driveway every day after school.
She was bigger, taller, and a better shooter than I was.
Ah, damn.
But after a number of ass whoopings by his sister and growing to the magical height of 6'8", he ended up playing for Fresno State in college for 2 years, averaging 15 and 7 and putting his name on the NBA radar for his shooting and handle at his size. As we all know by now, he got picked with the 10th selection by the Indiana Pacers, a team who had already had an established shooting wing and a 2K demigod, but feared the injuries were slowing him down and they'd pretty much drafted Paul George as his replacement. After a few steadily improving seasons, by year 3, PG became an all-star for the Pacers and one of the most improved player in that third season. He even made the playoffs in that season and played pretty well, although it was his first time as a star and it was still the Miami LeBron era, so you know he got his ass handed to him. The same could be said for 2014, but he got very close to taking down LeBron in this season with Roy Hibbert, and he took the LeBron Heat to 6 games in the Eastern Conference semifinals, dropping 37 in a Game 5, but most notably ending Chris Anderson's NBA career with this dunk.
Here comes George, got the step and stuffs one move and counts on the foul.
And so after a few promising playoff runs, things were looking very up for both Paul George and the Indiana Pacers, who had been mid for years and years on end before this, so there was a lot of expectations going into 2015. But then...
Real uniform, that is. There goes a little bit too fast for his own good. Nice contest, but a foul. Paul George into the stanchion. Yep, this is the most important. Unfortunately, this might be serious. Yeah, this is unfortunately part of the reality.
This injury not only affected the Indiana Pacers directly, but it also took a direct hit on Team USA, with guys like Curry and LeBron taking a decade to play for the Olympics again after this injury. Miraculously, after the season of rehab, PG-13 came back better than he ever was and played his career best basketball in the next 2 seasons. But there was one thing that remained the same, and that was a lack of any playoff success. Yes, he was facing the GOAT nearly every season, but to say that there weren't winnable games in these series would be lying. In the last 2 first-round outings during his time with Indiana, Playoff P shot a combined 13 for 40 in both closeout games combined.
No OT tonight. Ball game.
Tie! Missed everything.
Not knowing what we do now, things at this point looked great for Paul George and the Pacers. He had just gotten his 2K cover and the signature shoe with Nike by 2017, but the Pacers kept hitting that wall in the postseason, and in the offseason, it was time to make a decision about the Paul George era in Indiana. Also, he paid a stripper to keep quiet about getting pregnant multiple times, so add that to the list of L's already stacking up. Anyways, hitting free agency, Oklahoma City Thunder shocked the world when they moved Victor Oladipo and some guy whose dad played in the NBA to acquire Paul George, pairing the reigning MVP with what was seen as one of the league's best players and subsequently was replacing the hole left by KD just 2 seasons ago. To add to the already crazy expectations for the Thunder, they decided to go ahead and trade for Carmelo Anthony right before the season, forming a team that would dominate in my team but unfortunately would explode in real life.
Or the concept of starting at the 4 or even coming off the bench. And the second question is...
Who, me?
Oh.
The Thunder were near the top of the list in odds to win the championship that season, which made it all the more disappointing when they improved on the previous season by just one total win. It was pretty obvious looking back that adding two on-ball dominant wings was not the thing they needed, so the addition of Carmelo and Paul George at the same time mysteriously did not drastically improve the Thunder to championship contention. Regardless, coming into the playoffs with all the star names on the team, there was still some high hopes, with Paul George even creating the legend of Playoff P ahead of their first round matchup versus the Jazz.
I'm used to it. I'm used to this. Y'all ain't met Playoff P yet, huh? No OT tonight.
And for some more context, the Utah Jazz were the 5th seed, sitting right behind the Thunder, led by a rookie Donovan Mitchell, young Rudy Gobert, and Joe Ingles. Not only did Joe Ingles outshoot Paul George from 3, but the Jazz manhandled the Thunder in just 6 games, and yet again, facing elimination, now known as Playoff P, he vanished, making just 2 of his 16 shot attempts. Now Westbrook must have been going through the craziest whirlwind of emotions right now, going from the highest usage ever in 2017 to OKC bringing him 2 former All-Stars, and then finding himself taking 43 shots in the closeout game, pretty much just replicating last season. PG ended that series with more turnovers than 3-pointers made, and this is where I believe his reputation as a playoff choker really became a reality. Immediately after choking away the first round in 2019, Paul George followed that up with the best season of his career yet, placing 3rd in both MVP and DPOY voting, averaging career highs across the board. The duo of this and Westbrook averaging a 3rd consecutive triple-double in a row were clicking and made some serious noise ahead of the playoffs, where they had matched up against the Portland Trail Blazers led by a red-hot Damian Lillard. PG had a fine series besides shooting the ball pretty bad, but when it came to the final game, rather than the usual brickfest, the Thunder's best perimeter defender at the time, in defending Dame, who not only dropped 50 points, but dropped a 37-foot bomb on his head.
Lillard, long-range 3,
To make matters even worse, up to this point, the Pacers had just as much playoff success as the Thunder, if not more, taking 2018 LeBron, the player that Paul had never overcome, to 7 games, led by the resurgence of Victor Oladipo, who was absolutely unreal over the last 2 seasons in Indiana. And I haven't even mentioned Domantas Sabonis, who ended up making an all-star team for them, and also was the reason that they landed Tyrese Halliburton, who in just 2 seasons with the Pacers has already led them farther than PG ever did in his 7 years with the team. Man, the L's are already piling up at this point, but it only got worse after that 2019 offseason. After pairing up with Kawhi in LA for a ridiculous package sent to OKC, including this guy, who we'll get to later, PG, Kawhi, and Pat Bev told the league it was their turn to take over. Unfortunately, a word I feel like I've said a million times at this point, that didn't end up happening, much in part to a little thing that had LeBron winning Disney championships. But let's not forget in that bubble, up 3-1 versus the Denver Nuggets, the Clippers let Jamal Murray and a Jokic, who was not the MVP we know now, reverse sweep them with a 4 for 16 shooting performance in Game 7 from none other than the man himself.
Y'all ain't met Playoff P yet, huh?
I mean, the playoff choking got so bad that George openly said it caused him depression, which, I mean, after watching him in those playoffs, fair enough, man. I'd be depressed too.
George, way off. It's the side of the backboard.
Fast forward to 2021, PG actually had his best playoff run to date, making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals even after the loss of Kawhi Leonard, carrying the Clippers to a 6-game series versus the 1-seeded Suns. But by this point, you already know what happens in that closeout game, so I won't even say the stats, but just know he got outplayed by Marcus Morris in the biggest game of their season. After yet another playoff series of being outplayed by another co-star in 2024, Paul George decided to sign with the Philadelphia 76ers to pair with a known playoff riser in Joel Embiid, because, quote, the Clippers wouldn't give him Kawhi money. Why would they give you Kawhi money? I would love to know why they would ever give you Kawhi money, considering he was a 2-time Finals MVP, and before the Clippers even got Kawhi, he'd won a championship on the Raptors leading the team. Oh, and you know the guy that the Clippers traded to get a few playoff runs and some podcast episodes? That guy's the front runner for MVP right now and the leader of the best team in the entire Western Conference, with one of the brightest futures in the entire NBA. So not only has Paul George not won anything, choked routinely, he has also been a part of 2 trades that were overwhelmingly negative for the teams that received him. I guess the Thunder didn't really get negative because they flipped, Paul George into the assets, whatever. But you get the point. Like, every team that traded for this guy got worse outcomes when they traded for him. So when you hear Paul George get called a superstar or a prototype NBA star, do me a favor and ask whoever said that, what has he done to show that? Paul George has continued to be and probably always will be a Temu superstar, with his only one season that was actually at a superstar level, in which he got 50 and a logo 3 dropped on his head in that season. I get he has the hezzy pull and he's 6'8" with the best handle ever, but when it comes to performing when it matters most, superstars elevate their game, and Paul George does not do that.